conservative values and religion are so big in the US election. Even in Russia, which by a lot of opinion polls is considered 70% Orthodox faith, religion is nothing compared in the political issues, is nothing compared to what you have in the US. When, for instance, the discussion starts about the rights, women's rights for abortion, it's quite strange that these issues of ban on abortion are into the political mainstream in the US, with high chance that certain bans would be introduced. I think, Joe, the question is to you, is it really a 21st century issue, and what is that about this special role of religion and social conservative values in the US election? And I also want Andy to touch upon that as well.
Let me address your first question about the Affordable Health Care Act. I break with my party, or some of my party, that say the first thing that we're going to do is if we get into power, we're going to repeal that. I don't think that's a good thing. I think that there needs to be constructive advice of how to implement this effectively. Maybe it needs to be tweaked a little bit. Maybe it needs to be modified. For example, I don't, and my guess is none of you would, want to have to complete a form if President Obama is reelected in 2014. There's a couple of little things that take place with this Affordable Health Care Act, where I have to complete a form that basically says, I got this problem, this problem, this problem. That's my business and my doctor's business and my family's business, not the government's business. In other words, what I don't want as an independent and free citizen is I don't want a blueprint of whatever problem I have or don't have in some government bureaucrat's hands that may someday say, well, you know, Mr. Johnson, you're 75 years old, you've lived a pretty good life, we can't help you with your problem. That's, to me, that's just not good. So, is it important for people with pre-existing conditions to have insurance? Yes. Is it important to have some type of system in place that does not break families' total, their income, because maybe they don't have enough insurance? Yes. But does it need to be implemented perhaps in a way that is much more fair than, here is the Affordable Health Care Act, it may not taste like honey. Oh, and by the way, this shot is not going to hurt. And then all of a sudden, you've got this piece of legislation in front of you that most people don't even still understand, that many people didn't even read when they voted on it. And who does this affect? It affected citizens, because guess who opted out of the Affordable Health Care Act? Guess, the people who voted for it. The United States Congress opted out of it. I got a problem with that, because if it's so good, you know, for everybody else, then why does the United States Congress opt out of it? Doesn't make sense. So my guess is that there will be something is going to have to happen. The Supreme Court has ruled on this. So Roberts Court made a decision that pretty much shocked everyone. You know, I don't think that I can skillfully debate that. I'm not an attorney. Certainly on constitutional law, that's for sure, in any sense of the word. But from a political perspective, you know, at the end of the day, I don't want to see this repealed. I want to see it implemented and implemented correctly. And this is where it's going to take dialogue and discussion. Your second question about the effect of religion in the United States politics, and certainly when we get into social concerns, be it abortion, same-sex marriage is a big issue. I mean, those sorts of things. You know, at the end of the day, you know, when it gets right down, when you walk in that voting booth, most people are not thinking about those issues. They're thinking about what impacts their wallet. How are they going to pay their mortgage or rent? How are they going to have enough money for food? How are they going to have enough money to pay for their insurance, whether it's automobile insurance? How are they going to have enough money? Can they buy a new car? These are the sorts of things that people think about in the United States when they go in to vote. You know, I mean, I can talk all day about, you know, what my religious beliefs are, but you know, at the end of the day, those are kind of private, and I don't know. I just don't want the government impacting me, telling me what I can think and what I can't think. And I think that we're seeing some of this now, and I'm uncomfortable with it. And my colleague earlier brought up the Tea Party. You know, I'm a Republican, but I'm not a Tea Party guy. I'm more of a John Sherman Cooper Republican, a Nelson Rockefeller Republican. I'm a progressive Republican. I am not one that basically comes into to a new election and says, you know, I'm backed by all these people, and we're either going to do this my way or the highway. No wonder Mitch McConnell says, well, we're going to make him a one-term president. And the reason for that is he's got, you know, a bunch of new people down here that's just been elected that are screaming at him saying, we're going to get Obama. And so, then, you know, McConnell says this. Then this happens in the House. Then we have a Republican primary where it took a long time for Mr. Romney to finally get over that, and then look at everything that he had to say to compete with. You know, I'm conservative. I'm conservative enough. So there are things that you have to say that when you're running in an election, and then because you need to win, unless you just want to get out there and raise your name, help your law business, or write a book, something like that, then you really need to win. Then you move to the center to govern. But my overwhelming thought here is that this is a divisive issue. But at the end of the day, it will not break the United States. I don't believe it will. I think that what the United States is looking for now is, you said, give us, you know, give me a chance, I'm going to do this, I'm going to change some things. Okay, fine. And the United States did. But now I think what we're looking at is that people are sitting back going, you know, maybe I'm not an economist. You know, all I'm trying to do is raise my kids, put them through college, that sort of thing. Maybe I don't understand all the big things. I've got these new employment numbers that are out today, 7.9%. That came out today from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. No president since Franklin Roosevelt has ever been reelected with those numbers over 7.4%. This is a problem. And so, I mean, you sit around and you think about these things. How am I going to make this work? How am I going to do this? And you see these numbers, 7.9%, and you think to yourself, no, I don't buy that. It's higher. People believe that it's higher. Americans don't focus on, in an election, we don't focus on what's going on now. We're focused on what's going to happen in the future. And I think what you're seeing right now with these poll numbers shift, and all of a sudden a narrative that was bought by not only the conservative media, but the liberal media as well, what you're seeing is that people are, you know, moving about in their heads, and you're seeing a change here that's I call it a sea change. As I said 3 weeks ago, whoa, I mean, I could have some conversations with some of my most conservative friends who would question my credentials as being chairman of the Republicans abroad. It's a fact. But I think what we're seeing here now is a move to the middle, and we're seeing opportunities that are going to present themselves in the next couple of days, and you know, we're at that point of making a choice, and I don't think that there is time for momentum. I think the days of momentum are over in this election period, unless something catastrophic happens. But you know, there again, my thought is that the religious issues, at the end of the day, in my opinion, really don't need to be debated by the government. That's, you know, church and state are totally separate, and I don't need the government telling me what I can believe, not believe. If, you know, my wife, for whatever reason, wants an abortion, has an abortion, I don't need the government telling me, well, you know, that's a decision we're going to make. That's a decision that her and I and the doctor will make. You know, you understand what I'm saying. I don't think the government should be involved in that.
Thank you, Joe. Andy.
To answer the healthcare question, essentially, well, the charge was that Obamacare was socialized medicine, that all of your rights as a patient would be taken away, everything solved by bureaucrats, etc. Well, ultimately, there is currently in the United States, and before Obamacare was passed, there's always some sort of rationing of healthcare. Previously, healthcare was rationed just by not giving it to over 36 million Americans. Don't have it. That's rationing. And most of what they suffered through, if they needed medical care, the answer seemed to be, well, you can get it at the emergency room at the hospital. Well, that's the most expensive kind of care, and it's also not the kind of care that a lot of people need if they have chronic illnesses. They need to be taken care of on a regular basis. There, obviously, the Health Care Reform Act, there was one thing to control costs that the many liberal-leaning or left-leaning Democrats did want, and that was a government option in the Health Care Act, i.e. that instead of choosing individual insurers, private insurers, there would also be a government option to compete with these individual insurers. And the logic was, well, if government is so incompetent, it won't be able to provide anything, and people will just stick with the individual insurers. As an answer to your question is, well, when the government ran everything, it wasn't so great. It was an opportunity to compare, in many ways, Medicare and Medicaid, for example, in the United States, which are those government-run programs for the poor and then for the elderly, are more efficiently run from an administrative standpoint. That is, they have much lower overhead costs. Could it have worked out? It didn't work out. Go back to the point that I mentioned earlier. I think if there had been a better work and better cooperation from the Republican side in the Health Care Reform Act, in the act in its original part, or even moving forward, I think we could have gotten a much better bill, but that hasn't happened. Mitt Romney does say that he would, one of the first things that he'd like to do is abolish it when he gets into office. I don't think it's going to be completely possible because of the Senate not allowing. You'd have to actually have legislation to overturn it. I don't think that's going to happen. Another option has been picking and choosing the parts that people like. But remember, in this compromise that was the health care compromise indeed within the Democratic Party, you give and take a lot, and you accept things that aren't popular to get the popular things in, and you make shared sacrifices to get a bill that you are satisfied with. So picking the good parts and leaving the bad parts out is undoing the point of the entire bill. So one way or another, we're going to be moving forward with some sort of health care because we can't go back to the way it was. And I think there's a path moving forward in which we will have something very close to universal health care. To get to the point of religion in politics in the United States, possibly one of the things to be somewhat disappointed about was the religious influence in the nation, in the political system, was not always one of the religious right dictating to a party, but it was once, even 30 years ago, 35 years ago, balanced both by radical leftist religious figures as by radical right religious figures. Now, the radical leftists seem to have taken a bit of a holiday, no longer involved so much as they used to be, and there is a distinct religious view in some parts of the Republican Party socially. I believe that was done, created, and very much fostered by the second Bush administration, or the second Bush presidency, that's George W. Bush, which has brought in a lot of things that may have been best left to the state level or not involved in the politics at all. This is possibly one of the reasons, and a few others, that gives the Obama administration a leg up moving into this election. That is, if you have been paying attention, there's a very, very big, what we call gender gap, sex gap. That is, Obama is much more popular amongst women than he is amongst men, much more popular amongst minorities than he is of the white population as a whole, which still makes up about 72% of the population. But moving into questions such as religion. One thing to keep in mind, and you may not have thought about this, is Remember, there is the presidential election. There's 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election as well. Will the Senate remain in Democratic hands? Probably, but it's no guarantee. And then there are 435 seats in the House of Representatives, also up for also being contested. Then keep in mind that the winner of this election is going to have a very powerful, very important right as president going forward over the next 4 and most likely 8 years, if you assume the economy will continue. And that's going to be the opportunity to nominate people to the Supreme Court. We have 2 of our 9 members, that's Justice Kennedy and Justice Ginsburg, are very old. They are most likely not going to be serving at the end of the next president's term. Whether they resign or pass away, the tendency has been to pass away. If it is a Romney presidency, you are very likely to see right-leaning and probably anti-abortion rights president appointments or nominations by the Romney administration. And that is something that could impact, and keep in mind, if you select somebody who is, for example, as both George Bush and Obama did, who are young, who are in their late 40s or early 50s, these people are going to be impacting on the American society for as long, for decades, 2, 20, even 30 years. These people can be impacting on the society long after this presidency has ended, long after the president himself maybe passed away. So this is another important point to remember, and some people, not many, in the electorate are thinking this way. I agree with Joe in that people are voting with their pocketbooks, but there's a lot of other important things out there to keep in mind, and the Supreme Court justice nominees are one of those things that could be a surprise that people aren't paying attention to.
Thank you very much. Joe, you want to respond?
Very briefly.
Yeah.
If I'm not totally mistaken, which most of the time I am, George Bush had 2 Supreme Court appointees, correct?
I believe so.
Roe v. Wade didn't suffer then. I don't believe Roe v. Wade is going to suffer now, because to change Roe v. Wade, is my understanding, you have to have a challenge that's going to have to pass state muster. So this is probably going to happen in a very conservative state like maybe Oklahoma, Kansas, something like that, where you have a challenge to this. Then it's got to work its way all the way up till it gets to the Supreme Court. I mean, you probably are talking about 8 to 12 years, maybe.
Yes.
So I don't know that. But I think that most people who are thinking about that probably don't know those facts, and so I needed to bring those out. Thank you.
Any response to that?
No, that is correct. It does take a while to work through the appeal system of our court systems, and of course we're a common law nation, so it's nothing that's decided by a constitutional court because the constitutional court wants to do that. So yes, it would take a while, but again, there is that very real risk that in future it could be challenged and it could be overturned for whatever reasons, and as Romney would like, pushed back down to the states. A good solution? I don't think it's a good solution. Others obviously very much disagree.
Well, I think if it did get back to the states, and I think that would be a difficult issue, but I think then you would have people, driving from another state to find a doctor to have an abortion. In a case of, if it was a medical emergency, of course, or if it was an option, it would depend on the state, I think. And I think that the more conservative states would probably say, you'll have abortion on the cases, we can have abortion on the cases of assault, risk to the mother's life, something terrible like that. But it has to be done within the first trimester. You'll have other states that will say, we're not having this at all. And that creates a huge problem, I think, for that particular state that says that. And my guess is that if a state enacted that, they may do it once, but it would be overturned really quickly because you have a world of women running for office in that state. All of a sudden, the legislature would change, and that law would be changed. Case in point, in my where I'm from, there's a very conservative district right down the road, a little place called Sarasota. And I had a friend who decided that she wanted to run for office, state representative there, and she asked me my thoughts, and I said, you really don't have a chance. You shouldn't do this. And so, but she went ahead anyhow. And now she's in contention over one issue, and that is abortion rights. She's in contention. We'll see where this all happens, but that, to me, shows there again, this is not a Democrat or a Republican issue. This is a woman's issue. Some are Republicans, some are Democrats, but when you have this issue begin to come to the surface, it can change things, and it can change them pretty quickly. So, you know, is she going to win? I doubt it, but has she really elevated herself as somebody to reckon with? Yes, but it is a one issue that's the only one she's got.
Any response?
And that's understandable, and that's what would happen on the state level.
Thank you very much. I just want to move on I really want to give people the opportunity to ask questions, and we have one last but very important topic for everybody else but the citizens of the United States, as far as we can observe the course of this election debate, which is foreign policy. And my short remarks will be focused on a very important issue, which is the influence of America in the world. You hear all this aggressive rhetoric of Mitt Romney, who says that we need to be tougher on China, the currency manipulator. We need to be tougher on Iran. We need to be tougher on Syria. We need to be tougher on Russia. Just one question, because in politics you always have to balance your rhetoric with your actual capabilities. What if all these guys come together and say, well, come on, go ahead, does America really have the capability, including the economic capability? Just remember the growth of military spending under President Bush, which has also contributed to the debt problem. Does America really have the capability to follow all this aggressive rhetoric on different fronts? And I also have a question to Andy, because there are really serious reasons to say that American influence in the world in the recent years had somehow diminished. Because, for instance, America has, to my personal opinion, very little leverage of the important events that are going on right now in the Middle Eastern countries, which have passed through or are passing through this so-called Arab Spring revolutions. For instance, Egypt. Recently, President Obama has been making a very important remark about the new Egyptian government, saying that they're definitely not our ally, which is a very significant departure from previous tight relationships with Mubarak government, despite the fact that it was a dictatorship, but relatively solid relations with Mubarak government were one of the pillars of U.S. influence in the Middle East. Same issue with Pakistan. It's quite clear to see that Pakistan, a major U.S. ally in the South Asian region for years, is rapidly drifting away from that. And you can see a lot of clashes, political clashes between the countries, be it the issues like drone strikes or the Bin Laden story. And in many cases, we can clearly see that the United States is not a powerful global player as it was at least a couple of decades ago on many issues. So I think there is really a problem, and I wonder what will be your response to that, but we'll start with Joe. Please, Joe, go ahead.
Well, as a Republican, there again, I'm not a right-wing Republican. I don't believe that you should send in the Marines at every little bump in the road. That said, I think that the United States has lost perhaps a little bit of credibility over the past 4 years. There are various reasons, perhaps, for that. Maybe somebody says something that was not supposed to be heard, the mic was on when it should have been off. You know, a slip of the tongue, these sorts of things happen. But at the end of the day, this is a distraction, in my opinion, because the United States, in a few days, is going to make a decision, and I believe they're going to make it on their pocketbook. Historically, we've done that. It's, how do I keep my family budget intact? What do I do? And so people, I believe, are going to vote more on that issue than they are on a foreign policy issue. It is also strikingly clear that some statements that have been made by my nominee, I take a couple of issues with. I don't believe that Russia is the number one geopolitical foe of the United States. I don't believe that. What I do believe is that Iran is a huge problem. But the other thing that I believe is that there's been a couple of opportunities here in the past few years that seems to, I don't know who's driving that ship, with 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, because the president, on record, is not attending intelligence briefings. Why not? I don't know. I'm sure he's got a reason, but he was not. Then you have the pro-democracy uprising in Iran. What happened with that? Nothing. Now, then you have the Arab Spring. Boy, that's a real mess. So to me, these are big failures, quite frankly, during the Democratic administration. I wish they hadn't have occurred. But I think the other thing that we've got on our hands right now that I think you're going to hear more of in the next couple of days is that this little incident in Benghazi. Now all the facts are coming out, and it looks to me like the CIA is taking, this is what I read today, I believe they're taking the heat. But the questions are being asked, well, that's not what you said last week. And so what are you saying tomorrow? So these are, quite frankly, these are issues that at the end of the day, an independent voter is saying not a conservative Republican voter, because their minds are made up. Not or a Republican voter that votes Republican all the time, I shouldn't say conservative, but someone who votes Republican all the time, their minds are made up. Not a Democratic voter who votes Democrat all the time, their minds are made up. It's the independent voter. Basically, that's sitting around thinking, why are we dealing with all this other crap? I need to make sure that I can pay for my kids' college. I need to make sure that I can pay my mortgage. I need to invest for the future. All this other noise out there, I don't like it. Fix it. Because this other stuff is much more important. So, I think that foreign policy it certainly has a lot to play. I mean, I think it's very, very important. But, I just don't have the instinct feeling at all that foreign policy is going to decide this election. I don't have that. I may be wrong, but I don't have it.
Thank you, Joe. Andy, please.
A couple things very quickly to mention. While it may seem to a certain degree that the United States is diminished, it is useful to keep in mind that, yes, we did withdraw from Iraq, generally considered to be a victory. We did what we intended to do, and we left with a government that may not be what we wanted, but we did leave eventually on more or less our terms, although we did want to leave a force in the country to participate in some stability exercises. That did not happen. We are withdrawing from Afghanistan as well. And this is important. We've been at war for 10 years, and that's a long time to be at war. It's certainly exhausted a lot of the nation. We are tired of fighting. Did we eventually get what we wanted and what we expected out of these? I would say that most Americans would disagree, that most Americans felt that it was not worth the cost in materiel and in lives, with the possible exception initially of Afghanistan. Was Iraq a mistake? Yes, the president got us out of Iraq. The president's getting us out of Afghanistan. These are places that we don't need to be in anymore. And the plan, there is a plan to stay engaged in the region in Afghanistan, to stay engaged with Pakistan, and to try to make sure that those places no longer become havens for terrorists. And that also goes for a lot of the northern Africa and other places that could possibly be, thinking of Yemen and others, that could possibly be a long-term danger to the United States. If you look at what happened during the Arab Spring, well, Gaddafi, of course, was overthrown, and it was British and French warplanes did a lot of the work, but America militarily is still the essential nation. Nothing in the Western Alliance is going to happen, nothing serious without a few, except for possibly a few African adventures by the French or the British, is going to happen without American help. We spent $739 billion on defense last year. And that's the money that's spent on defense. That's not extra expenditures for the war effort. And that's much more than the next 10 nations, other nations combined. We're a major power. Still will be a major power for the near future. Is there an appetite to engage in foreign adventurism, as Romney seems to be calling for in Iran? No, I don't think there is, and that's pretty much clear by the general relief of withdrawing our forces from these other adventures. Is the United States capable of defending its interests anywhere in the world? Yes, it is. Does the United States have the desire to go and occupy or fight in Iran if there's other ways out of it, for example? Well, the Obama administration has been extremely effective in garnering international support to financially squeeze Iran, to make it more and more difficult for them to profitably export oil. This, of course, the ultimate goal is to ensure that the Islamic regime there does not acquire a nuclear weapon. It doesn't always take brute military power. It's available if it needs to be used, but the preference of this administration is not to intervene militarily even if it has the ability, if it doesn't need to. There's lots of other ways to address foreign policy problems, foreign policy crises. And indeed, yes, I have to correct you in the question of is Egypt an ally or not. It's up in the air, and that was later retracted by the administration. That is, it's not clear, I believe, I don't remember the exact quote, it is not clear whether it is still an ally or not, but the United States still has significant influence over the Egyptian military because we're a major provider of military hardware, military support. I believe they're the second largest recipient of American military aid after Israel. Do we have influence in that case? Yes, we do. Pakistan, do we have influence? Yes and no. But still, as far as projecting force overseas and projecting and also supporting other friends or potential allies, we're still most likely the only country in the world that can do it on a scale that makes it that makes a big difference worldwide. Which is also why you see us pivoting, and this is one of Obama's, the administration's positions, pivoting towards Asia. That is, with a growing China, China can be a foe, an adversary. It can also be a partner. Depends on how China, which of course is a totalitarian single-party state, evolves. But you see increasingly nations in that region, whether it's the Australians inviting American troops to be semi-permanently stationed over there, whether it's the Philippines, again coming back to America, asking for more visits, more close integration of military forces, especially with the territorial disputes with China and other nations, including Singapore, all looking to the United States, and indeed only the United States can balance China militarily in the region. So is the world more complicated? Is the United States somewhat diminished because of economic problems and all? Yes, but it's diminished from an extremely high base with an extremely professional military, an extremely effective diplomatic corps, and there are failures at times. The Arab Spring left everybody extremely confused. It's still hard to determine what to do best in Syria. Many people would prefer to see a more robust response. I believe that the death of the American ambassador in Libya, though sad, was not the tragedy or the rank incompetence that it is being tried to be displayed as. Obviously, there are a lot of factors involved in this very fluid situation. But to say very quickly, I agree with Joe in that This is not something that the American people are now thinking about, going to the polls, worrying about Russia as our #1 geopolitical foe. If anybody's thinking about anything, they're thinking of the economic might or potential threat of China. But other than that, foreign policy is definitely on the back burner now as Americans vote their pocketbooks and want to see a strong economic recovery.
Thank you, Joe. Any response to that?
No.
Okay, so let's move to probably the most interesting part of our session tonight, which is questions from the audience. And now I encourage you to raise hands, those of you who want to ask questions. And please, I would like to please you identify yourselves and at whom your question is specifically targeted. Толя.
Как я могу задавать по-русски вопрос?
Better in English.
Okay. So my question is about the Afghanistan, and this question is really important for me as a Russian, because if the U.S. troops will withdraw from the Afghanistan, it will be a huge problem for the security for the Russia, for my country. So my question is there any possibility to fix the problem of Afghanistan without American troops, and what will happen in your mind when the U.S. troops will leave the Afghanistan?
The question is for
both.
Joe, please.
Oh, I believe that it would be, I disagree with the policy that's being enacted right now. It says that we are going to withdraw troops from Afghanistan on a certain date. I don't think that that's helpful. If you're in an argument with somebody or a fight or whatever it is, it's like, okay, I'm only going to do this for 5 more minutes. That is not productive, in my opinion. If you're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars a day in some type of effort over there, my thinking is that why not find a better way to make this effective? And I don't believe that at the end of the day that it is helpful to allow that region to be unstable at all for the potential impact that it will have on your country. I also don't believe, let me go back to another thing, I do not believe that the United States, quite frankly, is really doing their best effort in this pivot that you talked about. I think it's important, but Russia's got an interest too in this area. And I don't see any dialogue between the two countries about a pivot to China, and I think that's a mistake. I think the United States should be speaking to Russia about this because they do have interests. But to answer your question directly, I don't think that leaving that just carte blanche is good for your country, and I don't think it can be solved without the United States impact. I don't believe that.
Thank you, Joe. Andy, would you want to add something?
This is one of those areas where it shows the ability of the United States and Russia to cooperate on areas of mutual interest. Russia has been very, very good at providing support to, in general, there have been some hiccups, to American forces operating in Afghanistan. There's a NATO base in your country through which Air Force, United States military personnel pass through, and also ISAF forces pass through. You have also permitted large numbers of flyovers, several hundred planes a year going across. You've permitted other material going by train. So it's been clear, but ultimately that's not a favor. It's because Russia, as you have pointed out, has critical interests in a stable Afghanistan. Almost in your interest to have had the Taliban there wiping out the poppy crops and keeping heroin from passing through the southern republics and into Russia, spreading heroin addiction and AIDS and other diseases. Is the United States abandoning the region? No, it's not abandoning the region. Some people may say, and as my Republican opponents in the party, that we should stay with a larger troop presence longer in Afghanistan. It's a legitimate point or a legitimate argument. Can we do something in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years that we haven't done in the previous 10? Many people feel not. Presence will be maintained there. Support for the Afghanistan police force, which is its own problems in military, will be provided. And there's an election again in Afghanistan in 2014. What will happen there? There's a lot of things, a lot of factors in play, but to assume that the United States, through withdrawal, is abandoning the region and just leaving it to become once again a terrorist haven or a center of narco trafficking or what have you is a mistake. There's going to be continued support for Afghanistan, for the Afghan government, military, advisors, troops, drones, I believe, also stationed there. It's just going to take on a different character, and it's something that, again, it's an area of cooperation between the United States and Russia, and I think you'll see that continue to develop, and ideally those questions addressed on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. You had a question. Please identify yourself.
Great, but if we speaking in Moscow, I prefer make my question in Russian. Мы много обсудили и до вас, и с вами вместе все аспекты политики на Ближнем Востоке, проблемы Израиля и так далее. Я бы хотел вернуться в Европу, и тем более, что господин Ромни родился в Мичигане, где есть огромное большинство польского населения. Заявление господина Ромни о том, что Россия является серьезным противником, главным противником Америки, могло бы получить в последнее время серьезную поддержку. Потому что есть заявление генерального прокурора Польши, господина Саримета, о том, что в погибшем самолете найдены взрыв. Тринитрол и динамит. Однако американские средства массовой информации и кандидат в президенты об этом молчит. Почему такой серьезный факт, который влияет на польскую диаспору в Америке? А господин Ромни, одним из своих первых встреч в предвыборной кампании были именно с польской диаспорой и с посещением Польши. Не было использовано. И почему молчит официальная американская пресса?
Вопрос к обоим, да? So the question is about, I think, Polish diaspora. The participant says that we've talked a lot about the Middle East, Israel, and so on. He wants to get us back to Europe, and he refers to the fact that Mitt Romney comes from Michigan, where there is a significant Polish diaspora. And he also mentions the fact that there is a very tough issue going on between Poland and Russia right now about the catastrophe of an airplane where President Kaczynski and a lot of Polish officials have died. There recently has been many information circulating in the media about Russian involvement in intentional bringing down this plane. There's a lot of speculation about that, even some information about explosives found at the crash site. Basically, the question is, on one hand, to Mitt Romney supporters, why does not he bring this issue about in dealing with U.S. voters of Polish origin for whom it might be important? And also the question is, as far as I understand, to Democrats, because the participant who asked this question thinks that the administration is not doing enough to address this particular issue of this catastrophe and Polish concerns with regard to it. So I think, Joe, you might be first.
I should begin by apologizing that I don't speak your language. It is a personal embarrassment. It's just not, that issue is not at the top of the charts, if you will, for voters in Michigan. It's not at the top of the charts for Polish voters in the United States. It's, you know, it's the economy. It is. And you were right. The moderator brings up, perhaps this was part of your question about some issues involving the intentional downing of this plane or lack of, maybe lack of clarity as to what really happened. That's a issue between Russia and Poland, I believe. And I don't know where the United States really comes into play there. That's an issue between the two countries, Russia and Poland.
Thank you. May I interrupt with just a short reminder of the campaign which took place 4 years ago? We met with one a very top official of the Obama campaign. I will not name him, but he came to Moscow just 3 weeks before the election. And he had a lot of papers on the table when we met him in the cafe. And on top of that was a table which had names of the swing states on it, the battleground states, Ohio, Florida, and so on. And it was broken down by how many people of Eastern European and Russian diasporas live there. So you have like 10,000 Croatians, 30,000 Albanians, and so on. And we asked him, what is this? And he says, this is very important for the president because if, let's say, there are too many Serbs living in the state, you don't go out speaking about the independence of Kosovo too much because they get offended. So, Andy, just if you have something to add on this, please.
What I believe that was Michael McFall when he came over. I think we talked to him at the same time. We had a fundraising. We had a fundraising event with him at just before he left, raised about $63,000 for the Obama campaign. He was fantastic. He talked to you guys. He talked to all sorts of people. Then he came over at a general meeting with Democrats abroad. We had about 120 members listen to him. Then we had a fundraising effort for about 28 people, raised $63,000 or $64,000. He's fantastic, full of energy, and that's also exactly what he said. Those were different times. At that point in time, it was important because in some of the states, especially as an ethnic president himself, he focused a little bit more on those individual ethnic areas. And the economy at that time was just tanking, but the effects were not completely felt. Now, after 4 years, again, as Joe keeps pointing out, he's correct, these things are increasingly taking a back seat to pocketbook issues. When we say pocketbook issues in the United States, we mean, are you feeling okay? Do you feel economically secure? Are you worried about losing your job? Are you worried about losing your house? If you're in that kind of situation, you don't care what's happening, be it in Poland or China or any place else. You want to see your life stabilize or improve.
Thank you. When I was speaking a year ago at the Chatham House in London, I was talking about the political situation in Russia, and when I said that it's very much influenced by economic issues and ongoing consequences of the economic crisis which started 4 years ago, I was called neo-Marxist for saying that. So we have this neo-Marxist notion in this hall tonight, but please, sorry, you had a question, gentleman over there. Yeah, you had a question.
Yes.
Please identify yourself.
Yes, my name is Vladimir. I'm from Higher School of Economics, Russia, sociology faculty, and I have a question for the Republican Party. Do you think that private market can make unemployment rate go down if direct creation workplaces didn't work out and didn't help? If yes, please explain why.
Do I think that the private market can do what? I didn't understand the question.
Unemployment rates go down. Actually,
Извините, а может вы по-русски скажете, может надо уточнить.
Частный рынок, вот он, по идее, снизить уровень безработицы. Как он сможет, если прямое создание рабочих мест, в принципе, не очень помогло? Если да, если вот уважаемый представитель...
Sorry, а что вы имеете в виду под словом прямое создание рабочих мест?
Ну, то, что вы пытались сделать.
Так они же не в частных.
I think I understand the question.
Yeah, Joe, if you do, please, because I don't.
My Russian's not so bad. I think what he's asking is that can market forces correct themselves?
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, please.
Can market forces correct a lot of situations most of the time? And my answer to that is yes, with a caveat that my colleague mentioned early in the discussion that the 800 million or 900 million stimulus package, billion, I'm sorry, billion, to keep the auto industry from going totally south, did put a floor. There are people who believe that, no, just let them go bankrupt, let these auto companies go bankrupt. And I don't share that opinion. I think that from time to time you do need a stimulus, especially in cases like what we were in. Because just, for example, a automobile company goes belly up in Detroit. I mean, geez, that affects, you got suppliers all over in Ohio and Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, that are providing jobs as well. So that's a huge impact. And if it provides a floor and it keeps the thing from going totally south, then I think that is okay. But I don't believe that I think it should be used only sparingly. And I think that it had to be used at this point. Was it a political thing? Well, of course. You know, you need Michigan, and he's got it. You know, the president's got Michigan. I think that's clear. But I do believe that market forces, to me, at the end of the day, if you can compete fairly, then yeah, I believe that it works 100%. I do.
Thank you, Joe. More questions, please. Over there. Thank you. Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much for your debate here. My question is a little bit general and has a status future, but let's think that this campaign, again, Obama or Romney wins whoever. In my question, it doesn't matter. But if the American voters really will have a great disappointment with all this politics, this bipartisan system going on, can you imagine in any of your bravest dreams that the US system will completely change? And such candidates as Ron Paul, for example, or the candidate from Green Party, or any other parties, might be seriously concerned as the candidate in the next campaigns. If there will be a total, real disappointment in this bipartisan system in the United States, if it's possible, of course.
Robert, this is a question to who?
To both candidates.
Oh, thank you, colleagues. That's a very important issue for us as well, because a lot of people are really getting tired of the same old menu of a narrow circle of same old parties, so that's a huge problem for us. Please.
Let me, if you don't mind, Andrew, address this first, because as a Republican, what I see is this. If Mitt Romney loses the general election, I believe what you're going to see is a revolution in the Republican Party. And I also think that Mr. Ryan is going to be your next nominee. But in that process, there's going to be a lot of bloodletting in the Republican Party, because people are going to say, you know, this is not working. You just cannot be so insular. You can't do it. You can't win. And so I think what you'll see is that if Mitt Romney loses, I think you'll see a real huge argument within the Republican Party to reassess itself, to get back to where it was several years ago, because it has drifted, in my opinion, too far right. That's just my opinion. There's something in the United States called, associated with the Republican Party, called rhinos. You know, the animal with the big horn, whatever they call them. Whatever it is. Well, the short of that is R-I-N-O, which is basically Republican in name only. Sometimes I feel like I'm a rhino. There is not a lot of room in Washington for moderate Republicans right now. It's, you know, there's just not, you know, that voice is not there, but it needs to be. And I think that what you will see, if Mitt Romney loses, I think that you will see some changes as the way, you know, the Republicans move forward, and that will have to start at the grassroots level. To answer your question about a total collapse of the two-party system, can a Mr. Paul or can somebody from the Green Party, can they ever have a huge impact? Not with the way that the system is set up right now. But what can happen is this gentleman who is running as a Libertarian candidate, Gary Johnson, right, that's his name?
Any relation?
Nope. You know, it's possible that he could take enough votes to keep Mitt Romney from being elected. That's possible. That's possible.
So, spoiler libertarians. As usual. Andy, please.
This is veering a little bit off topic, but the question then to you would be, for example, how are your candidates selected? That is, how do you select candidates from your party or any other party to participate? In the United States, unfortunately, in many states, we have a system whereby it's not the voters who choose their candidates, it's the candidates who choose their voters. Every 10 years, the United States undergoes a redistricting, or the census, I meant to say. It's required by federal law. So there's a count on every 10 years, and on the basis of that, the 435 members of the House of Representatives can be reapportioned to different states. If a state grows faster than other states, they can gain additional representation in the House of Representatives. Now, the other side of that is, as a rule, in most states, local legislatures will then set the district outlines. That is, who in that state, if a state, my state, Connecticut, has 5 representatives, okay, it used to have 6. When we lost a representative, the state legislature then draws new lines, not for 6 representatives, but 5. Now, in this case, the risk and the problem, which is increasingly afflicting, let's say, the United States, is that if, for example, the Democratic Party controls the legislature at that time of redistricting, they can appoint a committee to create districts which favor their party. And they can do it in such a manner where it's almost impossible for a member of the opposing party to effectively challenge members of the other party, the Democratic Party, let's say in this case. What they may do is group the opposing party's voters, likely voters, in one super district, one district where it's almost 90% of one party, so that they can have a smaller majority in other areas. The result of this, so that you understand, is that a Republican, for example, running in a state like Oklahoma, which is very solid Republican, is not likely to be challenged effectively by a member of the Democratic Party, Libertarian Party, Green Party, or any other party. His election is going to depend upon him gaining the party's nomination and becoming the candidate for the House seat or the Senate seat, or whatever seat we're talking about. This means there's an internal party primary, just like a mini election, to select these people. This is increasingly polarizing our government on all levels. Because what a person finds is, if I'm a Republican, if I am a centrist or a moderate, and I'm going to cooperate with the Democrats, I find myself in the election 2 years hence being challenged by somebody who calls me weak, who calls me cooperative, who calls me all sorts of mean and terrible and bad things, and he becomes in turn less likely to cooperate. That is what we see in what we've determined to be the Tea Party. The Tea Party were far-right people who challenged incumbents whom they felt were not extreme or ideologically pure enough, who call people like my colleague here rhinos, Republicans in names only, and push the party to the extreme. The Republican Party a little faster, I believe, than the Democratic Party, although that problem does partially affect the Democrats as well. Now, to talk about a change or a revolution, the state of California, for example, got sick of this. And they did have a proposition in which case they appointed created an independent commission to draw the lines for these districts, therefore removing the extremists from the equation. It can happen that people do. This is very internal. This is maybe a little complex. I don't want everybody to leave, but this is a little internal. It's internal. It's complex. But when you get a general revulsion, which is kind of happening, people getting tired of the bickering, the partisanship, and all, there are methods by which this can be addressed. And redistricting, addressing this partisan redistricting may be the way that it moves forward.
Thank you. There's a lot to fix in the American system. Churov has been talking about that. We're going to take 3 more questions. I got you. Please, the lady in the center. Please identify yourself.
My name is Anna. I'm a student. So my question might be even more generalized than the previous one. But I still wonder, Mr. President, President Obama is more focused on foreign policy. So if we take into account the experience of George Bush, the father, for example, who was extremely successful in his foreign policy, but he wasn't concentrated on economy and unemployment problems. So can we say that this strategy is not successful? Will it work out? So my question is for Democrats.
There's no general impression amongst people in general, the electorate in general, that Obama is focusing on foreign policy at the expense of domestic policy.
Yes, I agree totally. But if we follow the debates, we can see that he's very sophisticated about the foreign policy, but he's not that good in questions.
Sorry, you already had an opportunity to ask your questions, so we got it. So we're going to answer it.
Okay. Well, yes. Well, the president's been president for 4 years. He was raised a good part of his life overseas. He's had a lot of exposure through his life. Although you could say the same of Mitt Romney, who spent 2 years, I believe, in France trying to convert people. I believe to no avail. But I don't think I think he did not get any converts. But that's another question. But the president has proven himself to be a capable commander-in-chief, a capable representative of Americans overseas, of America overseas. And I think that was partially reflected in the 3rd debate, which he did have with Mitt Romney, in which they found lots of areas to agree. One of the main comments going both into the debate, before going into that 3rd debate on international affairs and leaving it, was that a lot of the differences between Mitt Romney and President Obama were partially manufactured. They were created simply to demonstrate that there was a difference and that Mitt Romney could present himself as a strong leader of America overseas, but outside of possibly the Libyan incident, maybe a little bit more friendship expressed towards Israel and maybe a little more bellicosity towards Iran. There seems to be, and possibly, of course, staying longer in Iraq, there's not a lot of a big difference between the candidates, and I would not expect to see under any circumstances big changes in the foreign policy, whomever wins in the election in 2 days, 3 days, 4 days here. So that would be something that I think most Americans are satisfied with the direction of American foreign policy, with some caveats, but overall a general consensus has kind of emerged as to what America should be doing and how it should be reacting in most of the trouble spots.
Thank you very much. Your question, please.
My name is Krasnov Ilya. I'm from Russian Libertarian Party. And my question about national debt. We all remember the situation in the last year, and what we can expect in this year about the situation.
You mean with a new president? Or the same president?
To clarify, is this a question regarding the ongoing campaign and the positions of candidates, or is it a question of forecast what's going to happen? Ну, вот вы имеете в виду что?
Что будет следующим, ну вот, допустим, станет президентом Обама или станет президентом Romney. И в обоих ситуациях, то есть хотел бы сравнить, что все решения не примут.
The question is about if Romney or Obama is elected, what both of them will do, just briefly, with a debt next year.
It depends on...
Cut it in half, for instance.
May I go first?
Sure.
Well, I think it depends on, quite frankly, what's going to happen in the Senate. If Mitt Romney is elected, they will move, he and the House of Representatives will move some legislation that will begin to trim the deficit and do it fast. The question is will the Senate approve it, which they probably will not, then the president has got to start overriding those sorts of things. So he starts burning political capital immediately. I don't know about you, Andrew, but my guess is that, and even if Mr. Obama, you can address this, but from my perspective, I don't see a lot happening quickly. I mean, not a lot. I see movement, but I can't say that there's going to be a lot happening quickly. But if Mitt Romney is elected president, then the things will begin to change. I just can't tell you how fast. But the Senate will be under a lot of pressure you better be careful about what you say no to.
Thank you, Joe. Today's, as they say, today's election pledge is tomorrow's broken promise. Sorry about that. Andrew,
most likely there is, we're going to be left with another divided government one way or another, as Joe has pointed out. Almost certainly we'll have a Democratic Senate, a Republican House. Presidency is still up for grabs, a Republican or a Democratic presidency. And it's unlikely, given the constitutional controls or responsibilities of the House of Representatives, that we're going to see any major movements quickly. Possibly the biggest leverage that the Obama administration has is simply doing nothing and letting the Bush-era tax cuts expire, possibly putting enough pressure on Republicans in the House to come up with some sort of compromise. Would it be long-term and effective? Would it be short-term and politically expedient? I'd probably go for the latter. But so therefore, my opinion is things will most likely be incremental in either event.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, colleagues. I see that you start waking up.